All right. So thank you to all who joined us, and thank you so much to Christy for just playing the whole program over again. So she played it twice, and I hope you all got to hear everything. That kind of put in mind the importance of hearing a premiere more than once, actually. And
I know. I'm already like 100% more than usual.
Yeah.
I think we should just always do that. Just give
so.
everyone two listenings.
Yeah, I think it's good for the ears. I mean, Stockhausen has a piece, Klavierstück 11, which is actually meant to be played twice. And it's kind of a guided improv piece. So it changes. It's a different piece each time. And so you play it once, and then you play at the end of the piece, and people get a sense of, you know, where they are in this music. When you play it here, a new piece of music once, the first time, it goes by so fast. And by the second time, you have a chance to kind of absorb it a little bit more. Okay, Monica, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I guess I should watch you in the Zoom meeting, because there's a delay. So yeah, how have you been doing since March? How have you been?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's been pretty crazy. It's been a real thrill ride, and I'm currently living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And for those of you who don't know me personally, I'm from Prince Edward Island, and I was living in Toronto for a long time. And so Baton Rouge, at the beginning of this was extremely, we were a real hotspot for COVID-19, and stay-at-home order and everything for a long time. And then it seemed like things were getting a lot better, and then now it's much worse again. So, it's been an adventure, but I am happy to see that at least like where I'm from and in Canada, things are getting a lot better there, and that makes me hopeful for the US, though it will probably take longer.
Yeah. How has work been for you? What kind of adjustment?
Well, for work, I work at an arts council in Baton Rouge, and we went to working remotely, and it was actually pretty seamless. I mean, busy, but I didn't have to, go on unemployment or anything like that. I was able to continue my work, and but it did affect me, creatively. I really didn't. As soon as this hit, I had zero desire to create anything, so it really was, when you reached out to me for this project, I was like, okay, this seems like a good re-entry point into, creative life, So, but it's actually, this piece is pretty different than a lot of my works.
It seems like you went, you dealt with chaos in a really interesting way. There are many ways to deal with what's happening now, but instead of taking the panic or the sense of anxiety that's happening, it seems like in this piece, you went in and deep.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when there's so much uncertainty and everything, I think I kind of wrote about this a little bit in my program note, but just that when everything seems so uncertain, there's a real decision fatigue that I think affects people, in terms of even things that normally are so easy, like picking out what movie to watch, or what are you gonna have for lunch, or whatever. When everything is changing, it just puts a lens on everything that makes it seem like just everything is harder, so I think with this piece, I was like, okay, I'm gonna work with simple stuff, and then it's gonna repeat, but I don't want it to be boring, and so I kind of went on that side of things.
Yeah. What about you, Christy? How was working on this piece for you?
Oh, it was a godsend, because I didn't want to play. I hope my students aren't listening, but I had no motivation to put the thing together, and so this made me do that. And it was great, because it was all kinds of new stuff. The foot pedal thing, I'm just not rock and roll, you know. So it was really fun, and Monica was so great to work with. We did a lot of kind of sketch kind of things, and here's what works and that kind of thing. So I thought it was really organic the way the piece came together.
Me
But
too.
yeah, it got me out of my, like, I don't know, slump or whatever. Just
Yeah, it sounds like we were both kind of in a
suck.
creative rut. Like
Right.
trying to climb out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the effects in the piece were just enough to get you into this like otherworldly feeling. And for me, it was really easy to just sink into the piece. It doesn't happen like slow pieces. Sometimes it takes you a while to get in. But combination of sounds and just the really slow pulse really made it such a great experience.
Thank
I
you.
didn't know you two had such. I mean, I guess I have a different experience with when all this happened because it was actually really busy at my house. My sister and a friend so. But for me, it got me thinking about how to adapt to the situation in a productive way. And I think more than trying to just give a little financially, I think the reward here is to be able to create something despite, and then to create an environment that's beautiful, in spite of not being live, just create the best possible environment. And watching people's homes has been really something quite unexpected. I think it's been quite a roller coaster, just seeing people you see in certain situations most of the time and then seeing them in their own homes is something really so that was great.
For me, I just realized how much I make music to make it with other people. And that was why I don't really want to practice etudes or anything like that. So this, like, even the sound environment, at least I was playing with something. I didn't program anything that was solo unaccompanied for a reason. So even though it was still just me, I felt like I was still kind of in communication with something, which helped.
Interesting. And you had a really great sound environment right there. You had a little bit of reverb on. Yeah. That really helped.
The magic of Rusty and Logic.
Helps. Monica, I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you approach music and the work that you do. I mean, I noticed that, you've written a piece for NakedEye, and I think in your choice of instruments or objects to be instruments, it seems like there's a trend in your work that you tend to look at or bring in objects that are not necessarily considered instruments to express something. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I wrote a piece for NakedEye Ensemble in 2018 called Processing Times. And in that piece, it was for pretty much almost the full ensemble. And so I brought in a lot of, it was based on, the project was based around a watch and clock museum. And so mine involved, I used a lot of found objects that the instrumentalists also played. So as kind of extensions of, they would also play their instrument, but then they would manipulate these objects to kind of, in many cases, try and imitate different sort of clock sounds, but ideally not in like a hokey way, like in a very like extended technique, abstract way.
Absolutely.
And I am definitely attracted to doing that type of thing. And in fact, that piece inspired me to write a companion piece called Traveling Times, which was performed by an Edmonton ensemble, which also used objects in addition to the instrumentalists. So they would, say, there would be a cellist or whatever, and then she would also have this like, big plastic tote that she'd be like trying to make the sounds of overpass, like anyway. So I love that type of thing. And I do it sometimes. I don't do it always, but it's an extension that I really enjoy. And I think, you know, with this piece, I think the challenge that I kind of made myself was that I was like, okay, I really want to do a loop pedal piece. But I also know that a lot of, you know, I don't want it to be too square, which, you know, is tough with when you're dealing with a loop, because you're dealing with repetition and things can get, you know, so that was kind of a challenge that I was like, is this going to be a bad idea or is this going to work? And then I was like, okay, well, I can work with this challenge and I can sort of find ways that I can make it within my own voice. And yeah, so I really enjoyed the result. And then of course, Christy, you know, took it away.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about the loop pedal at all during the piece. I mean, usually when you hear a loop pedal piece, you know it's there. I mean, it's
Exactly
there, you know, when the performer switches, and it's always there. And like you say, it can kind of lock you in a box. But I didn't think of that at all. How was it? Did you enjoy it, Christy?
It's just a lot to coordinate because I'm also trying to turn my page, and I mean, I got better each time. So check back with me in 3 more months.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, no, I liked it. I mean, I got to where I was enjoying playing around with it. It makes me very nervous, but I did just learn today how to fix a mistake if you made one. Because that was my thing, is what if I squeak on the very last loop, but I figured out that you can erase it. So the squeak doesn't come back to haunt you for like the rest of the piece. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, because originally one of the multiphonics that I wrote at the start of the loop was originally on bass clarinet, and it's a beautiful kind of ethereal, you know, multiphonic, but it just didn't sound very present. So we had to kind of like work with that, and then ended up doing that on B flat clarinet instead, and was a great result. So that was like a good solve.
I'd like to talk a little bit about both of you, your process. The thing about this project is that it's kind of in a restricted time frame. And usually what I like to do is to think like at least a year ahead. So there are like many months between the commission and then the actualization of the piece. But here was really, we wanted to do this really quickly and not drag it along. So it affected, in most cases, like the timing of the piece, obviously. We weren't going to do 1 hour pieces or 45-minute pieces or even 30-minute pieces. But how do you deal with that, Monica? How do you deal with short deadlines? How does that affect your creative process?
I think when it's a solo work, that usually helps. I get very intimidated when I think like I have to write for like, you know, an orchestra or like 10 players or whatever. But for a solo, because I've written so much for, you know, piano and harpsichord, toy piano, whatever, I kind of can rely on the fact that I'm like, okay, if I have a good idea and I know I'm not starting from scratch with the instrument, like I've written for it before, then I'm like, okay, I can jump into this and it should be okay. I mean, it's always a little bit easier if you have a bit more time, but at the same time, like usually it still takes the amount of time it's going to take, you know? So I still had enough time to be able to sort of percolate a little bit before jumping into the material, which is kind of an important part of my process. So, and the longer the piece, usually the longer time it takes for me to kind of like percolate and think about it, and also just gear up for like diving into actually working with the material.
Yeah. What about you, Christy? Did you have enough time to prepare? I mean, do you feel like you had enough time? It sounded like you did.
I mean, it's weird. Time is so weird right now because all I have is time, and yet I can't I can't figure out what happened a week ago versus 3 months ago. I have learned about myself that I'm very deadline driven. So if I've got something that's just hanging out there in the ether that I should take care of sometime, it's never going to get done. So having a date on the calendar that wasn't going to get canceled was awesome. And yeah, it actually, I think that I do best. I solve things more creatively when there is a time crunch. When I can't, can't let it percolate forever. I think that's just the way that I work. So, yeah, I thought it was inspiring. especially to try to come up with companion works and, you know, people that I know and whose work I know, or actually, you know, Jessica is my best friend, but Sarah has written a piece for my duo that I have with Jessica, and Meredith is working on a piece. And so I already kind of have relationships with all of the composers. So it was neat to put them all together in a virtual party, which I don't think would ever have happened. I don't think I would have programmed this, right? Like it was this environment that made this come together the way it did.
Yeah, I'll add too that I think as a composer, it's this kind of project is pretty fun, because normally when I finish a piece, you know, most of the time it's months, you know, months and months later that it's performed, you know. So this kind of thing where, you know, I finished it, I don't know, you know, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or thereabouts. And then like now it's like, boom, you know, it's premiered. That's very rare, I feel like. And that's usually, it's like with a composer, you know, it's such like a delayed gratification. You write the piece, you're like, okay, feel great about that. And then you don't hear it for like, you know, sometimes 5 months or 6 months or whatever. Sometimes it's less, but project like this is really fun for that.
Yeah, it's really new for us too. Like there's this immediacy, there's this, you start from start to finish, you can actually see the start. It's like, it was right there just a few weeks ago, which is fun. I want to close with just asking both of you what you're thinking now in terms of what you're doing, what you want to do, and then what are maybe some of the projects that you're thinking about or you want to do during this period, or you're waiting for something to happen after this is all over. We'll start with
Sorry, you starting with me? You cut out for a minute. Gosh. I want it to end. No, what I've been thinking is, and this is from my own place of privilege, what I've been thinking is I don't want it to go back to the way it was completely. Like I'm trying to decide what are things that I want to keep from this time, because there are some things that I'm really enjoying about this time that I don't think I would ever have until I retire or something, you know, especially now that it's summer, right? When it happened, it was the semester and it was all this scrambling of trying to go online and still work and all that. And now that it's a summer that I have to stay put, which never happens. I think like the making me stay put has been good for me, and I don't want to go back to exactly the hamster wheel that I was on before. So thinking about what things to keep and what is possible to keep, and some of the things are very healthy, I think, that are happening as far as having to step back a little bit. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm absolutely aware that music is really not a thing I like to do by myself, all by myself. Even, you know, when I'm practicing for something, it's still with an imagined audience or an imagined group of people I'm going to play with. So still in my imagination, when I'm practicing, it's with somebody else or for somebody else. So I've decided for me, it's not a thing that I want to just sit and have to myself. So as soon as I can collaborate, then I'm gonna. So soon. But this was good. What?
Are you saying you're not going to do this again?
No, I would, because this is a collaboration. Yeah. But like, again, just practicing my scales in a room by myself is just not interesting to me. Sorry, I know it's supposed to be interesting. I should love my long tones, but no, nope.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm still kind of, you know, I feel like I'm in like this weird like space between, you know, the space between, I guess, you know, to an extent. But you know, I have like, there's a big recording project that I've been, you know, wanting to kind of get started on. You know, I had been working on a set of chamber pieces over the last, you know, 5 years, and I just finished it like maybe the last premiere of it was in January. So now that I have all these like 8 works, I'm like getting ready to record them. But my plan was always to do it in Toronto, because most of the musicians are you know, Toronto based. And so now I'm kind of like, I have like a little bit of funding for it, but I need to get more. And then I'm just like, when is the border gonna open? So that's kind of like that side of things. And then on the sort of more creative, like composing side, I'm not entirely sure. I have a project with a pianist in the UK that it will probably be sort of a combo of piano and toy piano. So I'm going to start working on that, but it's not, the deadline is not for a little while. So I have some time on that. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to take this time just to kind of like reassess a little bit and see what direction I want to go in creatively, you know? Yeah, do fun projects like this. This is like the best kind of like pop-up project where you just get to kind of, you know, explore a little bit.
Have you thought of actually using the technology that we willingly or unwillingly have to use right now in your creative process? Has it even crossed your mind?
You mean like video chat and like that kind of thing?
I don't know. Anything you can think of. I mean, so something that would be for this medium. In other words, most of the stuff we're doing now, we're going to premiere live, right? This is kind of a stepping stone. It wasn't really meant to be in this situation, but we're making the most of it. But what about a piece that would live here, that you could only watch here, that you could probably do it on a big screen, but it would have to be in this kind of medium?
I mean, yeah, I love that idea. I mean, I used to do some, and I guess I dabble a tad, but I used to do a bit more electroacoustic music, and you know, that kind of thing, especially if you're working with like visuals and stuff like that, I think would be really, really fun to explore. And I think it's always something that I'm like, oh, am I qualified to do that? Like, do I have enough? Like, but really you just have to like do it and figure it out and learn and, you know, like just kind of demystify it a little bit. Because I could see that being, you know, such a good thing for that. Although I'm also reminded, you know, I just forgot, but, you know, a few years ago, NakedEye Ensemble also did this other work of mine in 2016, Divertimento, which is like a perfect work for something like this, because it's for, you know, it's basically for ringtones, and there's this text message sort of exchange that happens throughout the piece that kind of has a narrative element. And then there's just like a synthy sort of, or not even synthy, it's like sine tone and music box kind of accompaniment that goes with it. That could easily work for, you know, to be adapted to an environment like this.
Sure, for that show, it was at Tribeca New Music. I had some friends go to that show who generally are very skeptical of what we do, but they really loved your piece because of the text. I think there was this rapport with, you know, they could identify with texting. We were texting very like mundane things. We weren't texting philosophy. I mean, it was just really everyday stuff, and people could really connect. Yeah, that was a really good piece to kind of.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember. That was like, I think you had that concert maybe
it was a long time
a few days after the
after the election. Yes, I remember that very well.
It was another different time.
In shock back then.
Yeah, the rehearsals were
great,
really lively.
Well, we have another chance in November, so.
Yes, exactly.
Let's do another concert around then and then celebrate. Or something.
Yeah, but it'll be a good one. Hopefully.
So I don't know if there are any questions on. I'm actually not on Facebook. Is there any way to? If there are any questions, let me just see if I can check it out. For texting, I think. Yeah, I don't think there are any questions. So I think we can wrap up this longer than expected session. It was great. Again, thank you, Christy. That was such a, I mean, you really
know. You're such a rock star.
Oh, well, it's the foot pedal. Now I'm a rock star.
Someone who doesn't play alone. You really knocked it out of the ballpark this time. Yeah.
Dang. Well, you know, at least there's an imaginary audience, right? That's still a connection, even
Oh
though.
yeah.
It's not imaginary. I mean, they were there.
I mean, it's a very real virtual audience.
I mean, there's this connection we have to make, right? That's really kind of interesting and baffling. It's like you're in your room and you're at home by yourself, but then you know there are people out there, so you have to try to connect. That can be hard.
But I love that there are people in different time zones that I'm connecting with. People that would never be able to come to one of our live shows here in town.
Sure.
You know, so that's exciting to see some of that support.
I think there is a question.
Okay.
I don't know where. Hold on. I don't know where it is. Hold on.
Well, it would be helpful if the question were posted.
I don't know where it is.
This time, great.
Here we go. What are some of the challenges for writing for? Oh, I just missed it.
Oh, I have one here.
Right. Here we go.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. What are some of the challenges for writing and working with a loop pedal?
Oh.
Christy, do you want to go first or do you want me to?
Oh, coordination. No, for me, it's coordination. It got a lot better. I think, you know, I have Rusty here to help me with tech. And when I could start to hear the loop in my ear that I could play off of, that was better. So getting levels set so that it wasn't this little tiny box. Yeah, but that was mostly it, but it was really fun to explore. And remembering to turn off the loop, like erase the loop, because otherwise it just plays the last session's loop. And yeah, so little things like that, just coordinating myself. But I dug it. I'll do more loop pieces, I'm sure. And this piece a lot.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I could have made your life slightly easier by only including one instrument instead of the two. But, you know, you gotta have both sounds.
It's the coordination. No, yeah, I actually wanted you to use both. I'm really glad you did. I mean, I bought the thing. You might as well make me play
exactly. I think for me, the tough thing was I couldn't find that. I'm sure there are examples, but I couldn't find a ton of examples that showed a good like notation of like start stop, like, or like whether it should be overdub and record, or just like I looked at a few examples and they were all like it wasn't super consistent, which is fine. So that was one thing that was a little bit new. And then also, you know, one of the things that Christy and I talked about was, you know, I wanted to start the loop on something that was very spacious and like had a big long rest, which in the end worked out okay. It was tough because, you know, to set the pace with something where it's like totally spacious is tough to make everything match up. So I think she used a click track.
Yeah, I just had a metronome in my ear so that I made sure that the loop was supposed to be 5 bars long, and I made sure it was 5 bars.
Look in your ear, all the pieces. I guess I missed it was very discreet.
Yeah, it looked like my earrings. No. Well, that's my monitoring, because this living room, like I wouldn't have been able to sync anything because the speakers were, so I had to have monitoring for everything in my ear, but not always a click. But in that case, I just needed the metronome to make sure I didn't, because eventually it was going to be quarter notes and needed to be exactly 5 bars long. So.
Yeah. And another thing I'd say is that like I didn't really I didn't explore a ton of effects on a loop pedal. You know, I basically was just like start, overdub, like that was it. I didn't really do, like there are some interesting things that you can do depending on the loop pedal, but I kind of stuck to the basics for this one. Just partly because I think it's easier to do, you know, multiple, if somebody was picking this up, if they don't have the same loop pedal, you know.
But I think that's what contributed to like the seamlessness of the loop pedal. Like, it wasn't the one thing to look at, and it really blended the sounds really well. So we weren't thinking about it, but we're just more kind of enjoying the sounds. It didn't get in the way. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So there's a question from Gary Bonalumi. How do these experiences influence your teaching?
I think that's for you.
I'll go first. Yeah. Well, I find that my students are pretty cool and they're very cool. They're open-minded. And when I perform stuff like this, when I started performing more and more stuff, electroacoustic, more bass clarinet stuff, and then really making an effort to expand the composers I was working with to have more gender diversity and other types of diversity, my students really embrace that. And so I think all of my students are playing on their recitals. I think almost all of them play at least something that is not by a dead white guy. And I think that's very influenced by them watching me play, and also us going through the effort to find people who are alive who are trying to make a living doing this, and to support them by playing their stuff. So it's mostly been from a repertoire standpoint that this has influenced my teaching. Mm-hmm. And my students have no fear, none. I'm the one with fear. So that's, I guess, influencing me that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am not presently a teacher, really, so I don't know if I have much to add on that. I mean, yeah, not much to add on that at the moment.
Okay. So let me just check something, because again, because this is our first time streaming this live. So we've been getting comments that Christy, your forehead is really lovely, but sorry, this is probably my fault. So we'll figure all this out for next time. I have a week to figure this out. But yeah, it's too bad. And I was off to the side. Monica, you're front and center. Good for you. So
yay!
Well, you're here. So yeah, we'll have to figure that out. But so thank you both so much for this. Hope you're doing well. Hope you keep doing well. And I'm sure we're going to work with you again, Monica.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's always such an adventure.
And Christy,
in a good way.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And thank you, all of you who are still out there who watched the live stream. Sorry about the link confusion. It won't happen again. We'll fix everything for next time. And see you next Thursday. It will be Richard Belcastro and bassist Mike Phipps. See you later. Bye.